When you're asking Jose Siri to be the saving grace for your team, you may have already lost.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, this was rinse and repeat for the New York Mets on Tuesday night. Another game where a veteran starting pitcher puts them in a hole, and their bats can never climb their way out of it. Sean Manaea, with another bad start, opens up the game, gives up 2 runs in each of the first 2 innings, and that was pretty much all she wrote. In the first inning, he started things off with a strikeout, then a line out, so he was 1 out away from getting through that first. Bryce Harper gets him for a base hit at the end of a battle that went 8 pitches. Not a really bad pitch, just a changeup that he did get down quite enough, and Harper able to muscle it into right field. First pitch to JT Realmuto, a sweeper that ends up hitting him. So now you got 2 runners on for Nick Castellanos. He gets ahead 1-2, doesn't get a sweeper to break enough after his sweeper against Realmuto broke too much, and this one hangs in there for Castellanos, who rips it down the left field line for an RBI double that scores 2. Now he gets a ground out, gets out of that jam. Second inning, starts things off, gets the first 2 batters out, then actually gets the first batter out, and then he picks off Bryson Stott, who got a base hit. So once again, though, 1 out away from getting out of the inning, and Manaea gets ahead on Otto Kemp, 1-2 count, but he does not bury his changeup blown away the way he's supposed to, and instead hangs up for Kemp, who drives out of the ballpark for a solo homer. He's then facing Harrison Bader, and once again, hanging sweeper, back-to-back homers. Mets are losing 4-0, and they only score 3 runs in this game. Now, the good thing about this start for Manaea is Carlos Mendoza, in between innings, between the second and third, took him into the tunnel, really said, I believe in you. You got to believe in yourself. And Manaea went back out with the mindset, he said after the game, of screw it, can't get any worse, let it go and start pitching. And by getting out of his head, and he talked about how there's so many things he's trying to do on the mound, by removing all of that, not worrying about every little thing, every little finite detail, and just attacking, he ends up going through the rest of that start and has 3 pretty solid innings in a row. A 1-2-3 third against the middle of that Phillies lineup. Does that again in the 4th inning. 1-2-3 frame, picks up a strikeout. Then in the 5th inning, he walks the 9-hole hitter, Otto Kemp, who again took him deep in the prior at bat. And then he goes up against Harrison Bader, who's a really tough at bat right now, Kyle Schwarber, who would hit his 50th homer later in this game, and Bryce Harper, and he strikes them all out. So good sign for Manaea in that 5th inning in particular to get 3 good hitters out with strikeouts. And you saw him roaring a little bit when he came off the mound. Maybe this is the start that Manaea needed to mentally get that edge again and maybe get out of his head and just, as he said, let it go and just pitch. Maybe this is the turning point for Manaea. We'll find out in his next start. I think that's one small semblance of an encouraging sign that you can take from this game, but there's nothing else encouraging. And what's frustrating for the Mets in this game is you can make the excuse for this lineup that Ranger Suarez was locked in, because he was. He dominated the Mets. He was hitting his corners, hitting his spots, locating on the black on each side of the plate. A really tough at bat. Juan Soto is as good of an at bat as you're ever going to find. Like, there are very few hitters who can just operate an at bat, get into a good count, and put themselves in a position to succeed better than Soto. Ranger Suarez struck him out 3 times. So if you are that locked in, it's going to be pretty tough for any team to do anything against you. And I really do think this was very similar to the performance we saw from Hunter Green on Sunday. They do it different ways, but that level of locked in that we saw with Green, where he also struck out 12, I think the same thing goes for Suarez. It's a little bit of both, though. It's a little bit of the pitcher hitting their spots and executing, and the hitters, sometimes it's chasing a bad pitch. Sometimes it's looking at a pitch and striking out on a ball on the edge that you really need to at least try to foul off. A lot goes into it, but the results are all the same. The Mets unable to do anything against Suarez, and that pretty much just dooms them. That you go to Justin Hageman in a game that feels out of reach with the score 4-0, and you get a run back because Mark Vientos hits a homer once the Phillies go into their bullpen. But then Hageman is still in the game because it's 4-1, and you're in a position where you still have 2 more games against the Phillies in this series. You don't have a day off after it. So you don't want to burn your bullpen in a game that's not very winnable. So you're just going to try to continue to buy outs with Hageman. And then you don't even help him defensively in that 7th inning where Mark Vientos waits on a ground ball off the bat of Bryson Stott, and Stott beats it out for an infield single. Hageman gets the batter out before Stott and the one after Stott. So had Vientos charged that ball, come up firing, made the play, maybe it is a 0. Maybe the Mets can claw their way back in. But instead, you just prolong the inning. Bader gets a hit, puts 2 on the pond for Schwarber, who hits a 3-run homer and breaks the game wide open. So it's just frustrating when you don't do the little things. And also, you just have, after the game, Carlos Mendoza say, we got to fight. But then he still goes back to that trope of we got a lot of talent in that room, we're going to be fine. And I know Carlos Mendoza is not going to give the Terry Collins, we got to be better. We're going to get guys up here that will be better. That is an unrealistic expectation. And you have to provide the context of the season the Mets were having at the time. The expectations were way different back then. And it did make sense to say, if you guys aren't going to play well, like you're trying to light a fire into a team that just had nothing when Terry Collins did that. I'm not expecting Carlos Mendoza to rip his team like that. And that's not what you expect out of a modern manager. These guys are supposed to have the players on their side. And look, you want to know what Mendoza is doing to impact his team? Look what he did to Sean Manaea in between innings. And maybe that did spark him. I wish he did that 3 starts ago to Sean Manaea, but hey, this is not just to be a knock of the manager, but to me, it's more a matter of it's getting really tired. It's getting really exhausting watching this Mets team do the same thing over and over and over again, and then say the same thing over and over and over again. And then when you're watching them on the field, and Starling Marte, who hit into a double play in the 1 inning the Mets had a shot in the 5th inning, Brandon Nimmo, leadoff single. Starling Marte hits into his 45th double play of this season. 45 times he's hit into a double play. I'm kidding about that. That would be absurd. He's actually somehow only hit into 7 double plays, which is beyond me how it's only 7. I'm thinking maybe MLB.com hasn't recorded the double play hit into tonight, and maybe it's been 8, not 7. That still actually blew me away, and I hope I got some of you to buy in on the fact that he hit into 45 double plays this year. But regardless of that, your one chance was that 5th inning. That was the only inning that Suarez was not on. Nimmo gets a leadoff hit. Marte starts off his at-bat in a 2-0 count, and once again, he hammers the ball into the ground, and it's tailor-made. And then after that, you have the next 2 guys draw walks. And then who comes up when you have 2 runners on and 2 outs? Jose Siri. And I got a whole other diatribe in the next segment about Jose Siri being in the lineup tonight, and he strikes out. So that was the Mets' only shot. But the thing that frustrates me is then you see after that, and the dugout, you get a shot of Starling Marte chopping it up with his teammates, smiling, laughing. Lindor's grounding out later in the game. He's smiling, coming off the field. Like it's just 1 of 162. Like it's not your division rival that's about to win the NL East for the 2nd straight year that is slashing their magic number by beating you down. And there's just, you say after the game, oh, well, we got to fight. But where is the fight? Where is that team that we saw last year that was never say die, that had a chip on their shoulder, that would grind out at bats late in games and come back once, at least, just one time this year I'd like to see the Mets come back in the ninth inning and win a baseball game because they still have not done it. But yeah, we got a lot of talent in the room. And once we get there, once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. Playoff seeding, it doesn't matter if you're in the wild card race and have no shot to win the division. I'll tell you, for the Phillies, playoff seeding still matters. Didn't work for them last year, but would they rather have a playoff bye and be one of the best two teams in the National League than go into a 3-game crapshoot? Yeah, no. I think the Phillies are prioritizing seeding. But the Mets, let's just get in there. We'll get in there, and then our talent's going to take over, and magically we're going to show up. Well, I think you got to show a little bit of fight before then and a little bit of urgency before then. Otherwise, even if you back your way into this playoff race, even if the Giants and the Reds, who, by the way, both won tonight, even if they start losing over the final couple weeks and the Mets just squeak in there with 85 wins, does this team inspire confidence that they're going to go on a run? Lately, no. I still do have faith that they can figure something out. They got to play a lot better baseball than this. Now, in the next segment, what we're going to do, I'm going to stay mad because I don't understand why you rush Jose Siri up to the big leagues after 20 at-bats in AAA. So we're going to go through that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet, whether it's player props, whether you want to build the same game parlay, or if you're jumping into a game at live as the action unfolds, like maybe you were watching that game between the Bills and the Ravens and you thought, maybe a little comeback from Josh Allen. Let me throw a little sprinkle on the live money line that the Bills might come back, and they pull off a remarkable comeback. All of a sudden, you can win big. It's quick. It's easy. It's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sunday. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Today's episode is also brought to you by Nutrafol. You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. There's so many products out there, it's hard to know which ones are actually going to do anything. That's why you should give Nutrafol a look, because Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. And it's not just hype. This is a supplement clinically tested that targets the root causes of thinning and shedding with a proactive approach. Whether you're at work, out with friends, or just getting ready in the morning, Nutrafol is going to give you more confidence in your daily routine. And you can feel good about knowing that Nutrafol is NSF certified and backed by peer-reviewed studies. See thicker, stronger hair with less shedding in just about 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering Locked On Mets listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're about 500 subscribers away from getting to 15,000. I would love to get there by the end of the season. Really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And the Mets made what I would call a shocking roster move before the game on Tuesday. They activated Jose Siri off the IL, optioned Jared Young down, and they put Jose Siri into the 9th spot in the lineup, starting in center field. Now, the other few roster moves, for those of you who might have missed it, they also DFA'd Wander Suero, and they assigned Justin Garza to AAA. He cleared waivers. So those little bit of housekeeping there on the roster news. But Jose Siri decision really did blow me away, because this guy played 5 games in AAA. And mind you, he got hurt in the middle of April? So he had 5 months off. He's played 5 games in AAA, 8 games overall in his rehab assignment. He struck out in half of his at-bats in Syracuse. And they said, he's our best option in center field. And they called him up. Carlos Mendoza, before the game, said, we're going to play the matchups. And he even had the gall to say, I know Mullins has some good numbers against lefties, but we're going to get Siri some starts against lefties. Mullins will get in there against some tough righties, essentially saying, we're going to go with a platoon. Now, for those of you who listened to the show yesterday, you might think, Ryan's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Yesterday, he talked about why Mullins should not be in the starting lineup. Now he's complaining that Mullins wasn't in there. But to me, it's the thought process. It's the fact that he just said, well, Cedric Mullins had some good numbers against lefties, but we're going to go with Jose Siri. Which suggests, though, as he mentioned, that he's going to get Mullins in there against righties, that it is a platoon. To me, if you're going to go down the Jose Siri bandwagon because you just think Mullins can't hit, he's not a great defender in center field, he's hurting us, we need a better option, and you can't run Jeff McNeil out there every day in center field because maybe McNeil's shoulder is still bothering him, so you don't want to run him into the ground when you still think that come playoff time, maybe your best lineup has Jeff McNeil in center, and you want to make sure he gets there, so you're looking at your other options. And what I said yesterday was start Acuna in center. I thought he could provide a spark. He's been playing baseball all year, has not been hurt. He hit over 300 in Syracuse. Give him a shot. Why not? See what happens. I love to see what his athleticism looks like in center field on a big league field. I'd love to see it because in the minors, is he a Jose Siri level defender in center? No, but has he shown the ability to make good reads and still play a fine enough center field? Yes. And he was on the roster. So I thought, okay, maybe you throw Acuna out there. But they said, no, Jose Siri is healthy, so we're going to jump right to him, even though, again, he's only gotten 20 at-bats against real pitching because what he faced in Port St. Lucie was certainly not anything close to what he's going to see in the major. So he saw AAA pitching for 5 games, struck out in half the at-bats. Yeah, let's bring him right back up. And let's take Jared Young off the roster, who in his only at-bat since rejoining the Mets, he had a pinch hit homer. But yeah, discard Jared Young because we got to get Jose Siri in there against lefties. It makes sense because throughout Jose Siri's career, he's been a lefty masher, right? No. Jose Siri had one season where he hit lefties better than righties, and that was last year. 2024, he hit 187 altogether, a 620 OPS, but against lefties, he had a 678 OPS. Against righties, a 601 OPS. So yes, last year he was better against lefties than righties. But throughout his career, he has actually been better against righties than lefties. He has career reverse splits. And even last year, it's not like you're looking at Luis Robert this year, where Luis Robert, who I wanted the Mets to get the trade deadline because of the splits and because of the fact that his OPS against left-handed pitching was over 900. So that's a guy that mashes lefties. That is the guy that you would want in a platoon. But we've been doing this now for 2 years with Tyrone Taylor. Let's keep running Tyrone out there against lefties because he's so good there, even though in his career it's been neutral splits. Since he came to the Mets, it's been reverse splits. But yeah, sure, keep running him out there because we got to play left-right. Again, if you told me that Cedric Mullins is done, he's relegated to the bench, and they're just putting the best defender they can in center field for the rest of the season, Jose Siri, I'd say, you know what? I don't think he's going to hit, but it could still be your best lineup. I'm not mad at it. But to rush him back up without letting him get at least one more week of at-bats even, but because you needed to get a righty in there for this series, yeah, we have to go with Siri. And is Siri going to play the rest of this series? Who knows? Doesn't seem like Mullins is going to get a start against lefty, which, again, I'm not really advocating for Mullins to be in there, but it is a little bit ironic that the guy's been awful against righties all year. He's been really bad, and he's been in a platoon since he came here, essentially. They haven't been starting him against lefties. It hasn't worked. He hasn't hit. In Baltimore, he was hitting lefties, but you can't give him a start in this series against lefties because you have to get Jose Siri up, who hasn't played in 5 months. It just doesn't make sense to me. And maybe I'm getting mad about the wrong things. I don't know. Do I think if Acuna was in the starting lineup and they kept Siri in AAA and in that spot in the 5th inning with 2 runners on, 2 outs, do I think for sure Luis Angel Acuna is going to get a hit? No. Do I think he has a significantly better chance of putting the ball in play? Absolutely. And who knows? Maybe Acuna hits a dribbler and beats it out, and Francisco Lindor hits a grand slam, and it's a different ball game. Maybe Acuna draws a walk, or Acuna actually does get the hit and extends the inning. Maybe then Ranger stays wild, walks Lindor, and all of a sudden you got Soto up in a big spot. But Jose Siri, to me, was ill-prepared for that at-bat because he just hasn't gotten enough at-bats under his belt. Not to mention, he's just not a good hitter anyway. And part of this is also just the fact that I never was a big fan of Jose Siri as a player. I just don't think he's a very good hitter. I get that all of the value really is derived from his defense. I just feel like you're punting at bats with this guy in the 9-hole. Not that you're doing much better with Mullins, but just the whole thought process behind it doesn't really make sense to me. It really doesn't. Now, to play devil's advocate against myself, Jose Siri doubled in this game and scored a run. And it was against a lefty, a left-handed reliever later in the game. So that would be an at-bat that Carlos Mendoza would put up in front of me and say, look what happened in that spot. It worked out. He doubled off the wall. But to me, it just goes back to the entire thought process of it. The fact that Mullins has not been able to get in there against lefties. And if you were going to bench him permanently, fine. But you're telling me the guy that can't hit righties right now, you're going to keep putting him out there because he swings it from the left side. I don't know. That's the part of it to me. It's just the fact that it feels like they've just created a straight platoon with two guys that reverse splits. Siri, for his career, reverse splits, has hit righties better than lefties throughout his career. Hasn't hit anyone well, but still. Mullins, who this year has hit lefties significantly better than he's hit righties, and he can't see the field when the lefty's on the mound in a Mets uniform. Does that mean that if he had seen some lefties, he'd have much better numbers right now? We don't know. But I don't like we're playing matchups and you're not actually trusting the numbers. It frustrates me, but whatever. Final segment. We're going to touch on the wild card race. What else happened tonight? Where does that put the Mets? And we're going to give you a little bit of positive to close the show because the Mets won a playoff game in the minor league. So we're going to go through that to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There is one homestand left for the New York Mets that's starting this weekend. If you want to be there, Mets versus Rangers, trying to be the 10th man on the field, giving this team a little bit of a lift. Game Time's going to get you into the ballpark fast and easy. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, so you can actually get incredible last-minute deals. You can get clear seat views, a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying your tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game like Mets versus Rangers with Jacob deGrom on the mound on Friday night versus Jonah Tong. That's going to be a fun matchup. Game Time has last-minute tickets and zone deals for big savings, so take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service. We're going to updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime, take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and get a live graphics sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So the Giants and Reds each won on Tuesday night, which puts the Giants 2 games back of the Mets in the wild card race, and the Reds 3 games back. For the next 2 days, you got Clay Holmes going up against Christopher Sanchez, then David Peterson versus Jesus Luzardo. Sanchez, is going to want to get back at the Mets. They scored 6 runs off of him in his last start against the Mets. Since then, 2 starts in a row, 7 innings, 1-run ball. That's a tough pitcher to square off against, regardless of the success the Mets had in that last head-to-head. So I wouldn't feel too great about this game tonight. And then, sure, David Peterson, theoretically, this season has been the guy who won on the mound, but lately hasn't looked great. Jesus Luzardo, last time we saw him against the Mets, overall, the start wasn't great, but the stuff is still electric. So we'll see what's going to happen throughout the rest of the series. The good news for the Mets, even if they lose these next 2 games, they will not fall out of a playoff spot before this weekend because the Giants are 2 games back, but they're off on Thursday. So the best that they can do is gain a game and a half before then. So the Mets would be clinging to a half-game lead when they go into their homestand and starting off with the Rangers. And that's the one silver lining for me right now. The Mets have 9 of their last 15 games at home once you get through this series. And that's where they got to make their hay. They got to win those 3 series, hope that the Giants lose some series along the way. They're going to play the Dodgers over the weekend. That's at home. The Giants, like the Mets, have been much better at home than on the road. Then they hit the road for a series against the Diamondbacks and then another against the Dodgers, a 4-game set. So we all got to be Dodgers fans, rooting for them to beat up on the Giants to help the Mets in this race. The best case scenario, if everything breaks the Mets' way, they would. It's funny that as I'm looking at my notes, I'm like, the best case scenario is the Mets salvage a game in this series. Like, I can't even in my head process them winning both of these games. But let's just go down this rabbit hole. If they win one of these games and the Giants lose on Wednesday, they can't pull off a sweep of the Diamondbacks. Then the Mets, let's say they lose the game on Thursday. They go into the weekend a game and a half up of the Giants. If they win 6 of 9 at home, so they take each of those 3-game series, and the Giants drop all 3 of the series they play in. So they lose 7 out of 10. They have, again, a 3-gamer against the Dodgers over the weekend, a 3-gamer against the Diamondbacks on the road, then a 4-gamer in LA against the Dodgers again. If they lose 7 of 10 and the Mets had won 6 of 9, the Mets would go into the final week of play with 6 games left and a 5-game lead in the wild card. And then I might be comfortable. If not, I don't know if I'm going to be comfortable because this Mets team on the road going into Wrigley for 3 against a good baseball team, good luck. And then House of Horrors in Miami, I'll probably be there because I live in South Florida. Mets versus Marlins to close out the year. I don't know. Right now, this team just has to focus on one game at a time. Find your way to beat Christopher Sanchez again. Maybe Clay Holmes delivers a really good start. The bullpen is locked and loaded, so if Clay Holmes is 5 and dive, but he leaves with a lead, hopefully you can hold it down and get back into this series. And then maybe David Peterson really does show up in a big way in a big-time game, and you can end up splitting the 4-gamer, which would be a huge victory for this team, especially after dropping the first 2. But again, one game at a time, and we will focus on what's next for your New York Mets on tomorrow's show. But I want to give you a little bit of positive to close out the day. So here's the thing. In Brooklyn, the Cyclones are playing a playoff series. And Colin Houck, the Mets' first-round pick from a couple years ago, had a big day. Drove in 3 runs, including the game-winning 2-run homer in the 8th inning to put the Cyclones up 4-3. So a big day for Houck. We'll see if the Cyclones can win a high A championship. Here's the thing. The Mets are in the playoffs in every single affiliate, potentially except for the major leagues, depending on how this season ends, but they clinched the playoffs everywhere else. So St. Lucie, they're in the playoffs. The game got rained out tonight. Binghamton, they start their playoffs next week, and they won their game tonight on a pair of great pitching performances. Jonathan Santucci went 5 scoreless. He's been unbelievable. We're going to talk about him plenty throughout the offseason as we really dive back into the Mets farm system, because Santucci is the next one up. He's the next guy that you're going to have circled next year as far as the top pitching prospects in the Mets system to get excited about. He's part of the next wave after the current wave that we're watching right now with McLean, Sproat, and Tong. 5 scorers from him, 2 hits, like I said, no walks, 7 strikeouts. Will Watson, who just recently got up to Double-A, piggybacked 4 perfect innings of relief with 5 strikeouts, and the Rumble Ponies won the game 1-0. So some good stuff that happened on the farm in this one. Jet Williams homered, but please don't expect him to come up. We talked about this on yesterday's show. The guy's hitting 200 right now in AAA. Asking him to be the savior is bad for his development, and it's pretty unlikely that he would all of a sudden come up to the big leagues after largely not hitting AAA pitching and in a limited role come up and thrive as the Mets center fielder down the stretch. I'm not the biggest fan of Jose Siri, but I'd rather see Jose Siri out there giving you the elite glove over Jet Williams or even Carson Bench, who also has struggled in AAA. That's going to be all, though, for this edition of Locked On Mets. I'm glad I was able to give you guys maybe 90 seconds of positive about the farm system. to close out the show. I do appreciate all of you who tuned in, especially those of you who tuned in the whole way. As always, make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're going to be Locked On Mets Insider, you can find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. And thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts and league-wide experts that'll take you through all the games. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night and the Locked On MLB YouTube channel, as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.